Well, good evening, everyone. We better get started. We love our fellowship here, but another thing that is wonderful about this congregation is we love the Word as well. We want to dive right in. We are going to take just a few moments to finish our time in chapter 11, and a few things I wanted to point out. You may have some thoughts you wanted to add, and then we will jump into chapter 12 and go through. The goal is to go through verse 17 of chapter 12. And then after tonight, we have, I believe, 2 classes left. So we will finish 12 and 13. It might be 3, and I think we have enough time to do all that, and possibly even kind of looking at some highlights at the end. So we're in chapter 11, and here are some questions from last time we met. And let's see, we're in verse 22 of chapter 11, where the author writes, "By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones." I thought that was interesting. And I thought, well, when did Joseph mention the exodus? Do you remember the timeline of the Bible? I'm sure y'all have it down, and I'm the only one that has to go refresh my memory every time. But I'm like, okay, who was first, and then what, and then what, and then what? But remember, Joseph died, and there was a new king who what? Remembered not Joseph, right? Okay, so that's where we're at. Now look at Genesis chapter 50. That's how Exodus begins. Look at Genesis chapter 50. Let's see. Where's Genesis? Oh, it's the first book. Okay. Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. "And Joseph said to his brothers," this is the death of Joseph. This is the end of the book of Genesis. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." So he's going back in the past. He's saying that he knows of the covenant that God made with Abraham back when he called Abraham. He's saying God's going to take you into that land. He's going to fulfill the promise. Verse 25, "Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So then Joseph died. So Joseph had an understanding. The Hebrews author is telling us that he understood something about the Exodus. He understood that God was going to take his people out of Egypt and into the promised land. All right, so what do we learn about Moses in verses 23 through 28 of Hebrews 11? What do we learn about Moses? By faith, I'll read it and y'all listen for what we learn about Moses. We touched on this some in that last class. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and that they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. What do we learn about Moses in those verses? Somebody taught him everything. Yeah. We know his mother was brought there with him up until, we don't know for sure. From what I understand, and it was in a class, some ladies mentioned that it was maybe up until about 4 years old, somewhere in there. But was that enough time? Think about a 4-year-old. Was that enough time to learn everything that it appears he knows?
Not to our world, but we don't know what his world is like.
Okay, we don't know what it was. What was a 4-year-old like back then? Maybe they could chop wood and, be productive, right? Now we just clean up after them, huh?
They didn't watch SpongeBob.
They didn't sit around watching SpongeBob, that's for sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, good example there. Yes, sir, Rick. Yeah. His parents had faith. Yeah. Okay. And that had an impact on his life, even though it was for a short time. Doug, you had.
Well, it also, first off, just to be honest, a 4-year-old then probably was equivalent to a 16-year-old.
Very, very possible.
But anyway, seriously, this thing about age 4, up to age 4, sometimes do not negate that. Don't emphasize that. Don't put a real focus on that. But buddy, those are years that they need to be utilized to the maximum.
Yeah.
And for us to ignore and say, oh, just forget her, just little things, we'll do that later.
Yeah.
Later is now.
That's right.
That's so valuable.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes disregard that. We think we have tomorrow.
Yeah. They can absorb a lot at a young age.
We can.
That's right. Good point. And I do agree with that, but I also think, and we saw this in the book of Job, which the book of Job, it seems happened before the call of Abraham. In those days, God spoke directly to people he was choosing to communicate with. And so it seems to me obvious that God, it's not all recorded, communicated with Abraham. Could he have comprehended all of this within a few years? We don't know exactly how long and what all was involved. I think it is evident that God had communication with Moses, as well as Abraham, during these times. We know he talked to him at there's the burning bush. There's all these different incidents we can point to. But even while he was in Pharaoh's palace and kingdom. So a combination of both is what I see that Scripture is presenting. Neither are to be thought little of. So he definitely had an understanding of some things early on before the Old Testament Scripture reveals that to us. He understood some things. Wasn't an ordinary child, yeah. Everything is not written. Every story, every incident, every conversation, every interaction is not recorded. Be good, but then we could never finish the book. Okay, any other thoughts on what we learned about Moses? Look at verse number 27. He endured as seeing him who is invisible. He endured as seeing him who is invisible. Now, at first I wondered, does that refer to the Messiah? But what it seems like it refers to is the burning bush, Exodus chapter 3. So he endured through the things that he had to endure as seeing him who was invisible. In other words, there was a close relationship with God. And look, look at verse 26. he was looking to the reward. What's also mentioned, we think of reward, we think of wealth, we think of prize, we think of something of great value. What is also mentioned in verse 26? The treasures of Egypt. Now, for most people, the treasures of Egypt would be enough reward for their life, right? Hey, I'm set. I've got more than I could ever want or need or use. That's enough reward for me. And he said, all the treasures of Egypt are nothing compared to the reward I'm looking forward to. I think Paul talked about that. Right? I consider it all rubbish. I think that King James translates it dung. All a loss compared to the riches of Christ, you see. Let's look at Rahab. Why is Rahab the prostitute and liar mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11? What place does she have in this chapter of people of great faith? And what are we to understand or take away from this? That's in verse 31. By faith, Rahab the prostitute. The author didn't hide that. Wasn't trying to cover that up. The prostitute did not perish with those who were dishonest. Now that's interesting because she lied and did not perish with those who were that says disobedient. I need, I think, a higher prescription on my contacts and my readers. By faith, the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because they had given a friendly welcome. She had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Why is Rahab included in chapter 11? Yeah, great-great-grandmother of King David. Welcomed them in peace.
Well, all of these people give a smattering of people as a whole, to show that God uses people, and if they do what's right and believe in God and follow Him, then they're going to be forgiven and have a place.
Yeah. God uses all kinds of people. Yeah. All different situations. And purpose. On purpose. Intentionally. He knows what he's doing. Joshua 2:11 says she put her faith in God, who is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. She seemed to have become convinced of this God she didn't know. And in some short amount of time, she believed this is the true God. And she acted in faith as best she could at that time. She acted in faith to work on his behalf. As it was said, she's the great-great-grandmother of King David. What if she had not done what she did? What if she had not acted? What if she had just gone along with what she was supposed to do? Now, in Exodus 1, now about the lying part. In Exodus 1, we see that the midwives lied so that the baby boys wouldn't be killed, right? They lied. Rahab lied. They lied to prevent a greater evil from happening. Now, for us, we wonder, is that wrong or is that right? And I've thought about that with those you hear about in the during the Holocaust and people lying and hiding Jews in their houses and things like that. And the times we see those stories where people have risked their life to hide those, and do things that are morally good for the sake of others, but they've lied about it. Is that wrong?
Well, I think that it goes back to what you had talked about as far as Rahab goes. It goes back to what you had talked about in Hebrews 10, when it talks about us not forsaking the assembly. Not for that
Yeah.
And her situation, I think, is the same thing. It was, if she hadn't done what she done, if she hadn't done it, then that application would have been applied.
That's right. And history would have been altered. Now, it wouldn't have stopped God's purpose,
Right. Even though
but
she
history
was,
would have been altered. Yeah.
inspired.
Yeah. So the Old Testament, and this may be a little bit of a, bothersome, but the Old Testament does not seem to count that as sin, the fact that she lied, to prevent the greater evil. It doesn't really address it. It seems to realize that was necessary. It was God's work. And the New Testament does not contradict that. God didn't contradict it. Yeah. So we think, well, morally, what's the right thing? If I'm faced with a situation like that, and we're not all the time, are we? Every day, are you hiding, Jewish people in your in your house? Are you hiding, something like that? No. Are there Christians in there? Because if there are, we've got, our AK-47s and we're going to kill them all. Well, I guess I should say yes. And then, and there may be people in places in the world today who have to lie like that. And when you have the luxury of not having to face that, it's easier to wonder, well, what should I do? Scripture seems to have been okay with that. It was God's work. That doesn't say it's okay to lie, certainly, but it's interesting to look at that. We might call it moral dilemma. Any thoughts on that? I hope I'm presenting that in a way that makes sense. Anybody need to comment or raise a question on that? Now look at the author points. Here, let's wrap up chapter 11. This is the main point we kept saying we were going to get to in chapter 11. The author's point is that if people under the law, having never known Christ, remained faithful, how much more should we hold on to our faith? That's the point of chapter 11. They did it, so can you. All right, now chapter 12. First of all, why do we see this therefore there in chapter 12? Chapter 12 begins with, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is before us. Why does it begin with therefore? Therefore does what? What's the purpose of the word being there? It connects them, right? Why? Yeah. Because of what we just looked at, all of these people of old and their great faith, there are a cloud of witnesses, right? There are examples to look to. Now, the author is not saying literally they're sitting up in heaven watching us. Judgment Day hasn't happened yet. But they're this cloud of examples and testimonies to us that they stayed faithful, and so can we. Look to their faith. And now he's about to move to Jesus' faith. Let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings closely, and let us run with endurance the race set before us. Okay. Brother Lightfoot, in his commentary, gives this picture of a race in the Greek games. And you've probably seen this picture. Mine's a little more, I guess, safe for use here. But I wanted to put that because you've probably seen that. The idea of the Greek races, the Olympics, and the contests that they have, right? You've seen this on pottery, you've seen it, things like that. So this is from a depiction of the Greek races. And Dr. Lightfoot said the author's using this imagery to say more about our faith. Paul did the same thing, that we're running a race. Our faith is running a race. We've heard the word endurance come up quite a bit in the book of Hebrews, and it will come up again more here in chapter 12. Paul used two athletic illustrations in one place, 2 Timothy 4, 7 and 8. He said, I've fought the good fight, and I've what? Finished the race. He used that as well. Now, as Lightfoot brings up, agon is the Greek word for the intense contest or struggle that they went through, their contests in their games. Okay? It's where we get our word agony. In other words, the intensity of the struggle. Oh, that job was agony. That marathon was agony, right? The intensity of the struggle, the fight to complete it, the challenge, the competition. And that's what that was referred to among the Greeks. And in the Greek games, and that's why I wanted to use this illustration to help us grasp what the author is communicating, that the original audience would have picked up on very easily. The foot race was first in the Greek games. The foot race was first, and it was considered the most important one. And it was a test of endurance, agony. It was a competition, agony of endurance. Is trying to be faithful ever agonizing? Sometimes we try to make it seem like, no, it's so easy to be a Christian, but it's not always, is it? And maybe the older and more mature you get, the easier, maybe so, but probably all of you can tell of times, man, it was hard. From sin, yeah.
And you have to look at, the danger. You have to get rid of what endangers your relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
And because of that, you have to be so, I don't know the word I'm looking for, discerning.
Discerning, uh-huh.
And that takes, when you're thinking constantly, all the time, it wears you out.
Wears you out, yeah, yeah. Brother Wayne? We don't know what hard and difficulty is. Today, yeah. Yeah. And that's what the original recipients were dealing with. Persecution for their faith. Is this worth it? And it is, that's right. In chapter 10:36, we just looked at it not long ago. It said you're in need of endurance. You need endurance. You need to hold on. We'll see it again, as I said, here in chapter 12. So, how is faith like the Grecian foot race?
Well, it's not a sprint.
It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a long race. The more children you have, the more. Yeah. Yeah. There's more lives you're involved with. Yeah. Yeah. Stout-hearted plotters. Yeah. 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 You've seen those races maybe in person or maybe on video where they're just, it's one of those big marathons and they've just run and the person's just dragging. They're just in pain, they're in agony, but they're determined to cross the finish line. Maybe you were one of those people, maybe from the car to in here you felt like that, but that's the picture is hang in there. Sometimes you're just plodding along, you're injured and you're just struggling to make it, but he said, don't stop running. Don't stop the race.
Constantly unclogging bottlenecks.
Unclogging bottlenecks, uh-huh.
When you open up one bottleneck, here comes another.
That's right.
You know, and those guys didn't, everybody didn't get a participation.
Yeah. Nowadays, everybody's
Everybody gets rewarded.
everybody's a winner. Yeah. We're going to look at Paul's verse on that if we have time. Now, in Greece, the runners ran with nothing on, hence the need to. Now, we're not advocating that. Please be clear. We are not advocating anything along those lines. But there is a connection there in what he says in verse number 1. Let us lay aside every weight. Husbands, this is your worst nightmare, isn't it? So you're carrying all those bags. Your heart sinks. You're sick at your stomach, right? Horror, huh? And you start going like this. No, you turn around and you take a step back. No, I thought first about using a backpack and a bunch of gear, and I think of military folks and their training and wearing the heavy gear and having to do the I don't want to say hiking to belittle it, but the training to get through from running and point A to point B with the heavy gear, and then I thought of this, this person is in no condition, not ready to take off running. If they had to get out of there, they hear a bang or they hear something, how are they going to take off quickly? What would they have to do? Drop all those clothes and shoes in those bags. Okay, that's a good point. Voluntarily picked up. Good point. And that's what the author's saying. Stop it. Drop it. All the stuff that's holding you back from running the race of faith faithfully. What are things that hold us back spiritually? Now, the next thing he says is sin, the sin that clings so easily. And that tells us something about sin. It will hold you back easily, right? But the first part, lay aside every weight. He's not saying these things are sin in and of themselves. But their weight, and remember the illustration of the Grecian runners running with nothing on. Nothing to weigh them down or get in the way, to hold them back. Well, and they also had a view of the physique of the male body, and there's a little more to it than that from their perspective, but there's a illustration there to use. But what are some things that are weights for us? Okay. Guilt, regret. Okay. Yep. Preparation.
We talked to Cadence, and he's in his airborne training right now with the Army. And I said, well, what do they do? Just take you up in a plane and push you out? And he said, no. He said they start out at 10 feet.
10 feet.
And then you jump out, and then they teach you how to land, how to position your feet, how to roll. So, it's kind of like us, when we read the Bible, and we study the Bible, and it prepares us for situations when they come up.
Yeah.
If we're aware enough.
That training, preparation, then you're ready for jumping out of the plane, and like in his case, yeah.
Exactly. You're more ready to, and that's why, we watch, our older members, and learn from them.
That cloud of witnesses, yeah.
And so it helps. It helps prepare us.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Brother Wayne and Ray. Yes, unquenching desire for things. We love things, possessions, material things. And there's always more knocking at our door, right? getting our attention. Ray? Cares of the world. As John wrote about, yeah. Well, and in Jesus' parable about the weeds, the soil. Prioritizing other commitments. Work, sports, hobbies, possessions, cares of the world. Laziness. Could laziness be a weight that keeps us from running the race of faith? Of course, work can. Well, I got work to do. Sports doesn't get anybody's way when it comes to faith. I don't even know why I mentioned that. Man, hobbies. I would go to church. I would help out on that day, but it's not every time, but how come you always got other stuff? Leisure. Sunday's my only day off. We said laziness. What about busyness? You're doing 15 things, Sport. I mean, you're just doing all these things and don't have time to prioritize your faith. Okay?
A lot of things can be just categorized in desire.
Categorized in desire? Yes.
Whatever it is you're after.
Yeah. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Desire simple stuff.
Yeah.
Even for good things. We can desire good things and still suffer for those.
Yeah.
I think another thing too is be not confident in ourselves, low self-esteem, those kinds of things. I know those are words we get tired of hearing, but believe it or not, it does occur and it is out there.
Yeah. That's a good point. Lack of confidence, self-esteem. Nobody would want me to help. What do I have to offer? Last time I tried, I messed up. Or last time I tried, somebody said something negative to me and it hurt my feelings. So I won't try again. Or I don't do as good as the other person. Whatever it might be. Yeah. Yeah, good point. So the author specifies sin as things that we need to drop. We've got to drop sin too. The point is you can't run the race of faith with endurance if you're weighed down with a lot of things keeping you from running the race. Paul said, 1 Corinthians 9:24, run in such a way as to get the prize. You're in the race. Are you running to finish the race? He says, run to get the prize. There's a way in which to run. So, verse 2, we've got a couple of minutes. We need to run with our eyes on the prize, right? What's the prize we keep our eyes on? Jesus. Keep your looking to Jesus. And then he's about to say, consider him, but looking to Jesus. And what the Greek language there is saying is it's painting this picture of you're looking away from everything else. Your eyes aren't on everything else. They're on Jesus. Purposeful, focused, intent, right? Then we'll just go as far as we can in a little bit here, but he's the founder, some say pioneer or author of our faith. That's who Jesus is. We learn a couple of things about him. He's the founder or author, pioneer of our faith. What does that mean? He opened the way for us. He's the originator of our faith. It's all about Jesus, even in the Old Testament. The author means here that Jesus takes the lead and sets the example. We look to him. He's our inspiration, our example, and he's our goal. He's our everything. Look to him. Finisher and perfecter of our faith, the second thing he says, and we'll wrap up. In Jesus, our faith has its fullest expression. Everything finds its fulfillment in Scripture in Jesus. He's the finisher, the perfecter of our faith. In Jesus, faith has attained perfection. I'll read Hebrews 5:9 and we'll end there. Hebrews 5:9, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Look to him, keeping your eyes on him, not looking at all the things of the world, some good, some not, that will keep you from running that race with endurance and faithfulness. Okay, we will finish that section through 17 and then the rest 18 through I think it's 29 next week. Thank you for your participation.